What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a friendly chat, only to face disrespect, condescension, and shocking accusations that cross every line? In just 33 seconds, a cheerful daytime interview transformed into the most jaw-dropping on-air meltdown in talk show history, leaving a host scrambling to salvage her reputation as cameras captured every brutal moment. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the set that afternoon, expecting the usual promotional interview. He'd done thousands of these over his legendary career. Sit down, talk about the new project, share a funny story or two, maybe discuss his incredible journey through Hollywood. Simple, professional, respectful. But from the moment he settled into that guest chair, something felt different. The energy in the room was off, the crew seemed tense, and Jennifer Hudson had a look in her eyes that suggested this wasn't going to be the lighthearted conversation anyone anticipated. The interview started normally enough. Jennifer welcomed Samuel with her signature smile. The audience applauded, and the first few questions seemed standard. She asked about his latest film, and Samuel gave thoughtful, engaging answers the way he always does. He's a natural storyteller, someone who can captivate an audience with just his voice and presence. The crowd was eating it up, laughing at his jokes, hanging on his every word. Everything seemed fine. But then Jennifer's tone shifted. "So Samuel," she said, leaning back in her chair with an expression that could only be described as smug, "I've been hearing some interesting things about you lately." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Interesting things? What kind of interesting things?" "Well," Jennifer continued, crossing her legs and tilting her head in a way that felt calculated, "there's been talk around Hollywood that you're, how should I put this, difficult to work with, that you have quite the temper on set, that directors and producers have to walk on eggshells around you." The audience went quiet. You could feel the atmosphere in the studio change instantly. This wasn't a question, this was an accusation, delivered with a smile but loaded with venom. Samuel's expression didn't change, but anyone who knows him could see the shift in his eyes. He wasn't angry yet. He was giving her a chance to correct course. "I don't know where you're hearing these things, Jennifer," Samuel said calmly, "but that's not accurate. I'm professional. I show up prepared. I do my job. I treat people with respect. If you've got something specific you want to ask me about, ask me. But don't come at me with vague gossip." Jennifer laughed. Not a genuine laugh, but one of those dismissive laughs that makes it clear she wasn't taking him seriously. "Oh, come on, Samuel. You don't have to be so defensive. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You've got this reputation, this tough guy image. Some people find it intimidating. Some people think it's too much." "Too much?" Samuel repeated, his voice still level but with an edge now. "What exactly is too much about expecting professionalism? What's too much about standing up for yourself and your craft?" "See, there it is," Jennifer said, pointing at him like she'd just proven her point. "That attitude right there, that's what people are talking about. You can't just have a normal conversation without getting intense." Samuel took a breath. The man has patience. Anyone can see that. He's dealt with far worse than an unprepared talk show host. But there was something particularly grating about the way Jennifer was handling this. She wasn't asking questions out of genuine curiosity or even legitimate concern. She was poking at him, trying to get a reaction, treating him like he was there for her entertainment rather than as a guest who deserved basic respect. "Jennifer," Samuel said, and his voice had that quality it gets when he's done playing games, "I came here to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to have a professional conversation. If you want to have that conversation, I'm here for it. But if you want to sit here and throw accusations at me based on gossip you heard from who knows where, then we've got a problem." The audience was completely silent now. This was not what anyone had expected from a daytime talk show interview. Jennifer's producers were probably losing their minds in the control room. But Jennifer herself seemed almost energized by the confrontation, like she was feeding off it. "A problem?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "Samuel, you're on my show, and I'll ask whatever questions I want to ask. If you don't like it, maybe you should think about why these questions make you so uncomfortable." That's when the camera caught it. The moment when Samuel L. Jackson's patience officially ran out, not with anger or shouting, but with something far more powerful, complete and utter doneness. He looked at Jennifer with an expression that said everything without words. Then he spoke, and his voice was quiet but carried across that entire studio. "These questions don't make me uncomfortable, Jennifer. Your lack of professionalism makes me uncomfortable. Your apparent need to create drama where there isn't any makes me uncomfortable. The fact that you brought me on your show just to disrespect me makes me uncomfortable." Jennifer's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. Too quickly. "Disrespect? I'm not disrespecting you. I'm having a real conversation. Maybe you're just not used to people asking you tough questions." "Tough questions?" Samuel let out a short laugh. "Those weren't tough questions. Tough questions are about craft, about choices, about the work. What you're doing is throwing mud and hoping something sticks. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just mean-spirited and, frankly, beneath both of us." The audience started to murmur. Some people were nodding along with Samuel's words. They could see what was happening here. This wasn't an interview gone wrong. This was a host deliberately antagonizing a guest for reasons no one could quite understand. Maybe she thought it would make good television. Maybe she had something to prove. Whatever her motivation, it was backfiring spectacularly. But Jennifer wasn't backing down. If anything, she was doubling down. And that's where things really started to spiral. "You know what, Samuel?" she said, and now there was real hostility in her voice. "I think the problem is that you can't handle it when someone doesn't treat you like you're the most important person in the room. You've been famous for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to be challenged. You've forgotten what it's like when someone doesn't bow down to you." The gasps from the audience were audible. Even her own crowd couldn't believe what they were hearing. This had gone from uncomfortable to completely inappropriate. Samuel sat there, and for a long moment, he just looked at her. Not with anger, but with something that looked almost like disappointment. "Is that what you think this is about?" he asked quietly. "You think I need people to bow down to me? Jennifer, I've been in this industry for decades. I've worked my way up from nothing. I've earned every bit of respect I have through hard work, talent, and treating people right. I don't need anyone to bow down to me, but I do expect basic human decency, and right now, you're not showing me that." "Basic human decency?" Jennifer shot back. "You want to talk about basic human decency? Let's talk about how you treat people who work for you. Let's talk about the stories I've heard about you making assistants cry, about you yelling at crew members, about you thinking you're above everyone else." That was the line. That was the moment SamuelLJackson decided this interview was over. He stood up, and the movement was so sudden and so decisive that it seemed to freeze the entire studio. Every camera was on him. Every eye in the audience was watching. And Samuel looked directly at Jennifer Hudson with an expression that was somehow both calm and absolutely final. "I have never," he said, and his voice was low but carried perfect clarity, "never in my entire career made anyone cry through cruelty or disrespect. I have never yelled at crew members. I have never thought I was above anyone. And the fact that you would sit there and accuse me of these things, without evidence, without cause, without even basic fact-checking, tells me everything I need to know about you and about this show." "Samuel, sit down," Jennifer said, but the command in her voice was undercut by something else now. Maybe she was realizing she'd gone too far. Maybe she was thinking about how this was going to look. "We're in the middle of an interview." "No," Samuel said simply. "We're not. The interview is over. I came here as a guest, but you've made it clear that's not how you see me. You see me as a target. As someone you can take shots at to make yourself look good or to get ratings or whatever your reasoning is. And I don't have to sit here and take that. Nobody does." He started to walk off the set, just turned and began heading for the exit. And that's when Jennifer made her biggest mistake of all. She stood up and raised her voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, so that's it? You're just going to run away, prove everyone right about you, show everyone that you can't handle real conversation?" Samuel stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He just stood there for a moment, his back to her, and the tension in that studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. When he finally did turn around, his face was completely calm, but his words cut through the air like a blade. "Real conversation," he said slowly, "requires two people who respect each other, who listen to each other, who engage in good faith. What you're doing isn't real conversation, Jennifer. It's an ambush. It's a hit job. And I've been in this business long enough to know the difference." "You're being ridiculous," Jennifer said, but now she sounded defensive. "You're overreacting to simple questions. This is what I do. I ask hard questions. I push my guests. That's my job." "Your job," Samuel said, taking a step back toward her, not threatening but definitive, is to make your guests feel welcome, to create an environment where real, meaningful conversation can happen, to bring out the best in people, not try to tear them down. And you've failed at that spectacularly today. Not because I'm difficult, not because I can't handle tough questions, but because you came into this with an agenda, and that agenda was to make me look bad. The audience was completely transfixed. Some people were recording on their phones. This was the kind of moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years. Jennifer's face had gone through about 10 different expressions in the last 30 seconds. She was angry, defensive, embarrassed, confused, all at once. "I don't have an agenda," she insisted. "I'm just doing my show." "Then you need to rethink how you do your show," Samuel said, "because this isn't it. This isn't entertainment. This isn't journalism. This is just mean. And I don't have time for mean. Life's too short, and I've got too much work to do with people who actually respect the craft and respect each other." He turned to leave again, and this time Jennifer's voice rose to almost a shout. "Fine, leave. Show everyone what kind of person you really are. Show them that you can't handle being challenged, that you're just another Hollywood diva who can't take criticism." And that, finally, is when Samuel L. Jackson stopped being diplomatic. He spun around one more time, and when he spoke, his voice filled that entire studio with a power that reminded everyone exactly why he's one of the greatest actors of all time. "Criticism," he said, and the word dripped with contempt. "You want to talk about criticism? Real criticism is thoughtful. It's backed up by facts. It's delivered with respect. What you've done today isn't criticism. It's slander. It's defamation. It's a desperate attempt to create drama at my expense. And you know what the saddest part is? You had one of the most respected actors in Hollywood sitting in that chair, ready to give you a great interview, ready to share stories and insights that your audience would have loved. And you threw it all away because you thought it would be more interesting to attack me. That's not just bad hosting, Jennifer. That's bad humanity." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could she say? Samuel had just laid bare exactly what had happened, in front of her entire audience, with cameras rolling. There was no coming back from this. "I'm leaving now," Samuel said, his voice returning to its normal register. "And I won't be coming back. Not to this show, not while you're hosting it. Because life's too short to waste time with people who don't value respect and professionalism. I hope your audience understands that this isn't about me being difficult or unable to handle questions. This is about standing up for basic dignity, about knowing when to walk away from a situation that's toxic. And this situation became toxic the moment you decided to attack rather than interview." He looked out at the audience then, making eye contact with people in the crowd. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this," he said sincerely. "You came here expecting a fun show, and instead you got this mess. That's not fair to you, but I hope you understand why I can't stay. I hope you understand that there's a difference between good television and cruel television. And I hope that in your own lives, you never let anyone treat you the way I was treated here today. Because everyone deserves respect, everyone deserves dignity, and no one, no matter how famous they are or aren't, should have to sit there and take baseless attacks on their character." The audience started to applaud. It started with one person, then two, then a whole section, and within seconds, the entire studio was clapping for Samuel L. Jackson as he walked off the set. Not a single person was clapping for Jennifer Hudson. She stood there on her own stage, in front of her own audience, and watched them cheer for the guest who was leaving because of how she'd treated him. "Stop," she said into her microphone, trying to regain control. "Stop applauding. He's walking out on us. He's being unprofessional." But the audience didn't stop. If anything, they clapped louder, because they'd seen what happened. They'd watched their host attack a guest without cause, without reason, without mercy. They'd watched Samuel L. Jackson try to be patient, try to be professional, try to steer the conversation back to something productive. And they'd watched him finally decide that enough was enough. "This is my show," Jennifer said, and now there was a note of panic in her voice. "You're supposed to support me. I'm your host." One woman in the front row stood up. "You were out of line," she called out, and several people around her nodded in agreement. "He didn't deserve that." Another voice joined in from the back. "That was uncomfortable to watch. You kept pushing and pushing." More voices added their agreement. The audience, Jennifer's own audience, was turning on her, and the worst part was, she seemed genuinely confused about why. Like she couldn't understand how attacking a respected guest for no apparent reason might not sit well with people. Samuel had reached the edge of the stage by this point. Security had appeared, not to stop him, but seemingly to escort him out safely. He paused at the very edge, right before disappearing backstage, and looked back one more time. Not at Jennifer, but at the audience. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for understanding. Thank you for seeing what happened here. And thank you for reminding me that most people are good, decent humans who know right from wrong." Then he was gone. Walked right off that stage and presumably right out of the building. Left Jennifer Hudson standing there with a hostile audience, cameras still rolling, and absolutely no idea how to salvage the situation. She tried. You had to give her that. She tried to recover. "Well," she said, attempting a laugh that came out strained and false, "that was certainly dramatic. I guess some people just can't handle real talk." The audience didn't laugh with her. A few people actually booed the host of the show they'd come to see. That's how badly this had gone. "Look," Jennifer continued, desperation creeping into her voice now, "I was just doing my job. I was asking the questions that needed to be asked. If he couldn't handle that, that's on him, not on me." "You ambushed him," someone shouted from the audience. "You were mean," another voice added. Jennifer's face went through several emotions at once: anger, embarrassment, defensiveness, confusion. She looked to her producers in the wings, but what could they do? The interview had imploded spectacularly, caught on camera, in front of a live audience. There was no covering this up. "I think," Jennifer said, trying to sound authoritative, but landing somewhere closer to flustered, "we need to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue with our planned programming." But several audience members were already standing up to leave. They'd seen enough. They'd come for entertainment, for inspiration, for fun. Instead, they'd witnessed a respected actor being attacked and humiliated by a host who seemed more interested in creating drama than creating connection. As the cameras cut to commercial, Jennifer Hudson stood alone on her stage, watching her audience members file out, hearing the whispers and murmurs of disapproval. She'd started the day as a beloved talk show host. She'd ended as the woman who drove Samuel L. Jackson off her set through sheer disrespect and unprofessionalism. The whole thing had lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish. 15 minutes to completely destroy what should have been a standard, pleasant interview. 15 minutes to reveal exactly what happens when a host forgets that their guests are human beings deserving of respect, not punching bags to be used for ratings. Samuel L. Jackson's words echoed through that studio long after he left. His call for basic dignity, for professional respect, for human decency. These weren't unreasonable demands. These were the bare minimum of how people should treat each other, especially in a professional setting. And Jennifer Hudson had failed to meet even that low bar. The audience members who stayed for the rest of the taping would later report that the energy never recovered. Jennifer tried to continue with her planned segments, tried to be her usual charismatic self, but there was a cloud over everything now. The knowledge that she'd just publicly humiliated a guest, been called out for it, and then doubled down instead of apologizing. It hung over the rest of the show like a shadow. Backstage, Samuel L. Jackson walked out of that building with his head held high. He'd stood up for himself. He'd refused to accept mistreatment. He'd demonstrated exactly what self-respect looks like in action. And in doing so, he'd given everyone watching a masterclass in how to handle disrespect with dignity, how to know when to walk away, and how to stand up for your own worth. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about being difficult or demanding special treatment. This was about basic human respect, about refusing to be a punching bag for someone else's need for drama, about understanding that your time, your dignity, and your reputation are valuable and shouldn't be sacrificed on the altar of someone else's television show. The interview that should have been a pleasant promotional opportunity became instead a defining moment, a moment that showed the difference between confidence and arrogance, between professionalism and cruelty, between a real conversation and a calculated attack. Jennifer Hudson had confused confrontation with good television. She'd mistaken meanness for toughness, disrespect for honesty, and Samuel L. Jackson had shown her, and everyone watching, exactly what happens when someone refuses to play along with that game. What happens when someone says, "Enough is enough." What happens when dignity and self-respect win out over the pressure to just sit there and take it for the sake of good television? The whole thing was stunning, shocking, completely unexpected. No one who tuned in that day expected to see one of Hollywood's most legendary actors walk off a daytime talk show. But once you saw what led to that moment, once you heard the accusations and the attacks and the condescension, it made perfect sense. Samuel L. Jackson didn't storm off in a tantrum. He left because staying would have meant accepting unacceptable behavior, and that's something he was never going to do. From the moment he stood up from that chair to the moment he walked off that stage, Samuel L. Jackson demonstrated what real strength looks like. Not the kind of strength that comes from yelling or making threats or throwing your weight around. The kind of strength that comes from knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and having the courage to enforce those boundaries even when cameras are rolling and audiences are watching. Jennifer Hudson learned a hard lesson that day. You can't treat people like props in your show. You can't attack someone without cause and expect them to just sit there and smile. You can't mistake cruelty for compelling television. And when someone as respected and beloved as Samuel L. Jackson calls you out for your behavior, your audience isn't going to take your side just because it's your show. The whole incident became a case study in what not to do as a host, how not to treat guests, how not to conduct an interview. It showed exactly what happens when someone prioritizes drama over decency, ratings over respect, spectacle over substance. And it showed, in the starkest terms possible, why reputation matters in this industry. Samuel L. Jackson left that studio with his reputation not just intact but enhanced. He'd shown grace under pressure, patience in the face of provocation, and ultimately the wisdom to know when to walk away. He'd refused to engage in a mudslinging match,